Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today's Resideo webinar session. We're very happy to be providing an overview of the R7284U 1004, which is part of the boilers and combustion portfolio. My name is Carla Lopez, and I'm part of the Resideo training team. On behalf of all of us, I'd like to welcome you to our training session today. Information on our webinar sessions are posted at our website at www.resideo.com/webinars. You can find upcoming webinars by searching under the Discipline tab and looking at either the title HVAC or Plumbing on the left-hand side of the search bar. You can also find recorded sessions on the same website by selecting On Demand on the right-hand side of these filters as well. And then for our contractors joining us for today's live session, if you're interested in earning one NATE continuing education credit, there are a few things to note. If you provided your NATE ID on your registration form, we will submit those details to NATE for your attendance of today's live session, and we won't need any additional information from you at this time. However, if you did not provide us with your NATE ID on that registration form for this webinar, and you'd like to receive credit for attending our live session, we do ask that you email your first name, last name, NATE ID, and the date of the session you attended to homes.university@resideo.com within 1 week from today. This information is submitted to NATE 1 week following the close of each live session. And any requests sent outside of 1 week from our live training sessions cannot be processed. And as a reminder, we can only process requests for NATE credits when you attend that live webinar sessions, and we are unable to process requests for watching a recorded version of our training sessions. If you'd like more information about the NATE program, please visit their website at www.natex.org. And then one quick note before we begin our technical overview today. All attendees are muted. However, if at any point during the technical presentation you'd like to ask a question, please go ahead and use the Q&A feature that's found in your Zoom webinar controls. We're reserving the last few minutes of our time together today to answer any questions that you might have. So as we progress through this technical overview, make sure to ask those questions in that Q&A feature so that we can address it at the end of our time together today. So now we're going to turn over the presentation to Steve Kath. So Steve, we're going to turn things over to you.
Thanks, Carla. It is a pleasure to be with everyone here. As we talked about, today's session is going to be on the R7284U 1004 oil primary control. And even though the primary focus of the seminar today, the webinar today, is the R7284U, Resideo does have a whole wide portfolio of products in their residential thermal solutions group. Components for heating and water, various technologies, and the portfolio breadth with universal controls, so you have fewer SKUs to carry on your truck or in inventory, and of course like for like, where we have a direct swap ease. And just to take a look at some of the product families we have, gas valves, the ignitions, thermocouples, integrated controls, water heaters, and of course the oil burner controls like today's R7284U. The US boiler market, you can see, has an install base of about 9.1 million units throughout the country, with the heaviest concentrations in the Mid-Atlantic and New England regions. Resideo offers over 150,000 SKUs, including both universal and like-for-like solutions, specifically designed to service all types of boilers, aquastats, CAD cells, gas valves, igniters, and oil primaries. Again, to start, here's the R7284U 1004. What it is, it's a line voltage, safety-rated primary control for residential oil-fired burners used in boilers, forced air furnaces, and water heaters. And it's applicable for use with both hydronic and forced air systems. Used with the CAD cell flame sensor, it operates an oil burner and an optional oil valve depending on your system and how it's set up. To show you some of the features we have here about the R7284U, it's a universal compatible control. It replaces Beckett, Carlin, White Rogers, and all prior Honeywell residential oil controls. It can be used as an interrupted or intermittent control, and you have a full range of timing offering. And this one control gives you lockout timings of 50, 30, and 45 seconds. You have field adjustable on delay, trial for ignition, and blower off delays. With the valve on delay, anywhere from 0 to 30 seconds in 5-second increments. The trial for ignition and the blower off delay of 0 to 8 minutes in 15-second increments. You have a pump priming cycle, which we'll cover in a slide, limited recycle. And I think for me, here in the support team that I'm on, the diagnostics on the display with actionable information tells you if it's detecting a spark, if the CAD cell is high during the run, or maybe it needs adjustment or cleaning. Is the flame proving late in the trial? Low voltage alarms if voltage to the device itself is low, and an error history, the last 10 errors, what the error was, and how many cycles ago it occurred. And what it boils down to, like the slide says, it really does a great job of pointing the technician toward the cause of failure when we're going through troubleshooting here. And some of the additional features we have, a safe start check, where it checks for flame presence prior to lighting the burner. It's compatible with power venters without integral timers. And the plastic cover is oil resistant to protect the electronics. For those of you who might be using an Envirocom communications network, this device is also compatible with it and the Honeywell EnviroLink remote monitoring application, which enables dealers to monitor their customer systems on a remote basis. To get a look at the layout, you have the two-line display there. Simple to get into and out of installation with the up and down arrows and the I button, the Envirocom terminals, and the two TT terminals for the thermostat. On the back, which is really handy as opposed to some of the earlier oil controls, you've got a recessed wiring pocket there, which gives you more space for wiring in the junction box. You've got the spade terminals, which are easier to attach the wires to, just giving you a nice clean install when you're putting it on the system. As we get into, I think the key feature is the display features. You have the option of any one of 3 languages, English, Spanish, or French, the current system status, the CAD cell reading when it's running, diagnostic information, and it allows you to go through the setup of the control in real time so you can see what you're choosing for the options in the setup, again, depending on what your system needs. Getting into the setup here, when you first get into setup, it's pretty straightforward. You press and hold the arrow up, the arrow down, and the I button at the same time until the display changes. And what you're going to see is what we have on the display here. Standby, installer setup, and to choose continue, just press the up or down arrow to select continue, and then press the I button to get into the installer setup. The first thing you're going to see when you get into the installer setup will be what language do you want the device to display in. Use the up or down arrows to select which one is appropriate for you and your customers. And then when you've got that, once again, you press the I button to continue and move on to your next option, which is going to be the valve on delay. And the valve on delay, you have 7 options. It can go, it's a range of 0 to 30 seconds in 5-second increments. So you can go, anywhere from 0 to 30, depending on what you need for your system. Once you've made that selection, again, press the I button to continue, and it brings you to where you're going to set up the ignition time or lockout timing for your system. Again, the options are 15, 30, or 45 seconds. And you make that choice, again, you're done, press the I button, and you can move on to the next display. Now, what we need to tell you about is when you're choosing the lockout time, you can adjust it anytime up to the first 100 cycles. Now, what it doesn't mean is if you've run 50 cycles at 15 seconds and then decide, oh, I really need to change to 45, you don't get another 100. You've got 50 cycles left before it locks out. And when it's locked out, anytime you press the up or down arrow, you'll get locked on the display, letting you know that it can't be changed. Once you've gone through that part of it, you move on to burner off delay. And what it's there for really is to help reduce oil after drip related problems that you might have. This feature can be set anywhere from 0 to 8 minutes in 15-second increments. Again, you make the appropriate choice for your system by using the up or down arrows to select the time. And once you've made that selection, to continue, you press the I button and move on to the next option, which is the TT configured is what you'll see. And like the slide says, is what it does is it allows you to configure the TT terminals with an internal jumper, which can be useful in the situations where you are using an aquastat to help provide power to the 7284U, and the thermostat itself is actually on the aquastat. In a case like that, you want to configure it where it does have a jumper across the TT terminals. And next up in the installer setup, when you press the I button to move on, is the spark, in the on delay session. Again, it defaults to no. If you want it to be on, simply press the up or down arrow to move it over to yes. Once you've made the choice you want for your system, it pretty simply, you press the I button and you move on. And when we get to this section, spark during run, this is one of the features that allows it to be compatible with some of the older controls where you had interrupted or intermittent operation. When you have it select no, like it talks about there, the control will function as the interrupted control, which means the spark only occurs during the trial for ignition, shuts off once flame has been established. If you choose to select yes, what happens is the spark, like you read there, the igniter will run during the entire cycle for heat and stop only when the call for heat is ended. Clearly, the interrupted ignition, it uses less electricity, and it also reduces the amount of wear and cleaning or replacement of parts needed on the electrodes and possibly even the CAD cell. Next up into the installer setup option, it's the number of resets, which gives you, the installer, to determine how many lockouts can occur before it enters a restricted lockout. The options are 0, 1, 3, or no limit. Anytime you do go into lockout, to get it out, all you have to do is you press and hold the I button for about 2 seconds, or the display changes and it'll go back to that. If you get into restricted lockout, you have to hold the I button for 10 seconds. Now, a restricted lockout is caused by a number of consecutive hard lockouts on the same heat cycle. So if you're having a lockout during a heat cycle, it can point you, and you get the restricted lockout, it can point you in the direction of what you may want to look at in terms of troubleshooting. Next up, and this really would be appropriate if you are using the Envirocom protocol. It allows you to configure the device, the R7284U, for the type of system it's being used on. The boiler, a furnace, or water heater. If you're not using the Envirocom protocol, you can leave it at the default to boiler. It really won't matter which option you choose. Moving on, this is one that you might, as an installer, what you choose may depend on how comfortable you are with your customers or clients seeing what's up on the display. If you select yes, diagnostic information will be or can be viewed during normal operation. Selecting no, you have to get into installer mode to view the diagnostic information. And the case can be made for both, but if you have a customer who tends to like to press buttons, you may not want to show the diagnostics, but it gives you that feature so you can make the choice depending on the application. At that point, the installer setup's done and it defaults to quit. And if you're done and you're satisfied with all the options you've chosen, you press and release the I button to get out of that. And once you press the quit button, what the device has is a feature of, it allows you to re-baseline the controls. And what this does is, if you select yes, it starts averaging, restarts the averaging process for your CAD cell reading, how well is it done on the last call, the last 10 calls, and since it's been re-baselined. And it also takes a look at those same things for ignition time, so that in history, you can go back and say, how's the CAD cell been performing, which can help you with troubleshooting, and also in the ignition time, how long has it taken to ignite? If you select no, it simply continues to use the averages that have already been established with the previous use of this control. Getting on to this, now that we've gone through the installer setup and baseline, we get into what you'll see in normal operation. And when the R7284U is powered up and just sitting there, you're going to see standby on the display. And that's idle mode. What it means is there is no call for heat. It's just waiting to be told what to do. When you get a call for heat, the display tells it like it is. It's saying, I've got a call for heat. And you can expect to take a look at what the timings are. And what you see at that point is, in the call for heat, you'll start to see the valve on delay. For example, like the display shows, if you chose a 5-second delay, it would count down from 5 seconds, 4, 3, 2, 1, and 0, and would then move into, ignition trial. And again, when you see the ignition trial, it will count down from 15 seconds until the time runs out or flame is established. So if you've chosen 15 seconds, for example, and ignition takes place in 10, the display stops counting down at that point. And one thing that's kind of nice is During the trial for ignition, if you press the up arrow, what that does is it gets you into pump priming mode, which can be useful if you as a technician have drained the oil lines during service or installation of the system, and you need to prime the pump and get oil into the lines again. So if you've chosen, let's go back to 15 seconds, you've chosen the ignition trial of 15 seconds, it counts down to 10. What it's going to do then is add a minute, and now you've got a minute 10 for the pump priming to help with that one. And once the flame's proven, it pump primed at minute 10, and once it ignites and the flame is proven, what you see is the initial reading, ohm reading of the CAD cell in your system. And the display will show the status as running until the call for heat ends. As you might expect, the display will change, depend on the strength of the flame. So it's not unusual to see this reading changing throughout the call of the heat. And, as you said, it's based on the strength of the flame. Also, it could change depending on the performance of the CAD cell in there. So you see this varying widely. It can clue you into maybe there's an issue with the CAD cell. Maybe it's dirty, maybe it needs to be repositioned, but something to keep an eye on. And once the call for heat ends, what you'll get on the display is the burner motor off delay countdown. And this too will count down until the time runs out. Now, the burner motor off delay is selectable, if chosen, anywhere from 0 to 8 minutes in 15-second increments. And once that's completed, the display of the 7284U returns to standby, means it's just waiting for the next call for heat. The next part we'd like to cover in the R7284U are the lockouts and how do you reset the R7284U, what you get into in resetting everything. The first lockout is what we call a soft lockout. It's what you're going to see on the display. It can happen for various reasons, like it talks about a failed ignition, line voltage might be less than the alarm level. You might have a burner relay failure. The soft lockouts automatically exit after the period expires, and the countdown is not displayed until the error clears. You can exit the soft lockout by pressing the I button for longer than 2 seconds if you'd like. So we move on. Hard lockouts are entered for a number of reasons, again, similar to the other one. A failed ignition temp, flame sensed during the valve on delay for longer than the specified time that you've chosen. Flame sensed during the burner off delay, again, flame sensed for longer than the specified time after you've exited the run mode. And a hard lockout, that's a no heat situation. It'll lock out for that. Again, if you want to get out of a hard lockout, press and hold the I button for 2 seconds. Okay, so said until you do that, press the I button, it stays in hard lockout. Restricted hard lockout counts and happens when each hard lockout is counted by the control, and it happens when the specified number is reached. It goes into restricted lockout. You can get out of that, but you can only do that by holding the I button for longer than 10 seconds. And this is a case where if you leave this on the display, it says lockout, call service, it's probably a really good idea, because that's when you want the customer to give you a call, so they don't get creative with pushing buttons on there. So it allows them to say, it's locked out. I need to call my service provider to come take a look at why it's locking out. When you get into the troubleshooting for this device, we have a lot that the display can tell us. If the ignition didn't occur and there's no clue that the module can't sense, low voltage or flame signal or flame strength, it will just give you the display no ignition. If on the other chance no ignition occurred, but the R7284 didn't detect any spark, you'll get no ignition. Let's check the spark igniter, see if there is an issue with the igniter that might be contributing to this. If no ignition occurs and the CAD cell changes during the trial for ignition, but it doesn't leave or reach the flame threshold that you need, you'll get the notice no ignition. Check the CAD cell. And that's, that can be a number. It might be just the CAD cell eye that needs to be replaced. It might be just a little dirty, but it allows you to go check, that part to see if that's, it's going to be a real simple fix to get the heat restored. Next on the display in the troubleshooting, this can be an important one. If the display shows any CAD cell resistance without a call for heat, we all know that it's sensing light for some reason, somehow. And when you get something like this, where it says the CAD cell resistance is high, it's not going to make a call for heat, but it's also a pretty good sign that you need to see or find out where it's sensing or why it's sensing an outside source of light, which could cause it to read like that. This is a pretty interesting one, in that if the voltage drops below the minimum threshold, you get the following display. It'll say low voltage, 30% low. Now the voltage range for the R7284U is 102 volts AC to 132. Given a nominal reading of 120 volts, that's a range of about +10 to -15. The low level alarm is 80 volts AC. Now, if the voltage is below the low level alarm, the low voltage alarm level, the R7284 will end the current call for heat and will not start a new call for heat until the voltage rises above the minimum specified operational voltage. And the shutdown will occur if voltage drops to 80 volts AC. If you lose flame more than the allowed number of times on this display, it shows exceeded max recycles. And when it's in recycle, what it's telling you is that the device has lost flame during a call for heat. And when it goes into recycle mode for 60 seconds, the burner and the motor are turned off. And during that time, the display will show recycle, and the LED will flash 2 seconds on, 2 seconds off. Following the recycle mode, the device goes into standby. When you see the exceeded max recycles, what that tells you is the device has exceeded the limit of 3 recycles, which is a fixed number, and is locked out. So if it's lost flame, if you're seeing this, it's telling you it's lost flame a number of times during the call for heat. And it gives you a pretty good idea of where you need to check or what you might need to check there. Next on the troubleshooting is when you see the flame proven during the on delay, it gives you, tells you, the valve on delay, I've got flame. which we all know that it shouldn't quite be there at that point. There's an issue that why it's igniting it before that delay is expired. Next, we have the flame proven during the off delay, during the burner motor off delay period. And on this one, where you have an internal error, maybe a failed relay and defailed, this is one where it's time you're going to need to replace the device. When it gives you the internal error, there's something inherent in the R7284 that can't be repaired or replaced in the field except for installing a new device. If you're using the Envirocom circuit, you see this, what you've got, it means there's something shorted or you've got a bad circuit in the Envirocom circuit. Some troubleshooting there. Also kind of nice is when you see the flame proven late in trial, what it's telling you is, yes, it came on within your ignition timing, but it came on later in the cycle. So if you've got a, say, ignition timing of 30 seconds, you might be looking at something where it came on 20 seconds, 25 seconds, getting close to the end of the timing there for the trial for ignition. And what we've got here, this is another good one where it clues you in that if the CAD cell resistance was high during the run, it was still enough to allow the call for heat, but it's getting higher, which give you some ideas of maybe the CAD cell is dirty, it needs to be cleaned, or simply you need to put a new CAD cell in there to restore full operation of the system and have it run at lower level of resistance there. And if the flame has been present in idle mode for longer than 1 hour, it's out of sequence there. So you've got, again, it says you got a flame proven when it shouldn't be there, giving you some ideas of what and where to check for this this situation. What's nice now, we get into, you want to see what errors have occurred in this device. And what's really nice is the control saves the last 10 errors. To access the error history, again, it's pretty straightforward. You press the up and down buttons during the normal operation, and it gets you into the error history. To return to normal operation, press the I button. When you first press the, to get into the error history, it's going to show you what, the first error, no ignition, which cycle did it occur at? You had no ignition on the last cycle. And, you can move on if you've got more, more errors, you press the arrow up button to move into the next error. Sorry. And in this one case, exceeded the max cycle 5 cycles ago. And you can rotate through the error history to see what errors have occurred. You press the arrow up button. If there are no more errors, if you go through 2 or 3 or 4 and there are no more errors, you'll see error history. And at the end, to return to normal operation at this point, we'd simply press the I button, go back to the normal screen where it should say standby. We get into diagnostics on the device, and really what it'll do is it'll tell you the current status. You can access baseline information, cycle counts, and this is information that can be hidden from the homeowner when you go through setup. If you get into to get into this part, you press the I button at any time to access the information, the system information. And what you'll see when you first press it is the current status of TT, open, the limit's open, and let you know how that is. If you press the I, when you press the I button again next, what you'll get is the ability to use the CAD cell and see what it's doing. And it, say you checked yes, like it says, you'll see CAD cell is reading currently 75,000 ohms. Press it again, and what you'll see is the last cycle, it was 480 ohms. Press it again, the last 10 cycles, 410 ohms. And again, what it rotates through is the baseline, the average of the last 500 cycles. CAD cell has been running at approximately 380 ohms during operation. So it gives you an idea of how historically the CAD cell has been performing during operation. Press the I button again, and you get into the ignition time for the device, where what it tells you is, okay, ignition time, the last cycle, we had 12 seconds. It rotates through the last 10 cycles, ignition was 11 seconds. And since it was baselined, it's been 8 seconds. So it's had a pretty good response to ignition and, not exceeding any trial times that you've got there. And when you go through the cycle count, this is kind of nice, is it goes, you can scroll through 4 screens. It tells you how many lockouts since it was last baselined, how many recycles since the last baseline, how many cycles since it was last baselined, and how many burner cycles totaled there. So it gives you an idea of how many cycles the whole system has been going through. That's the end of the technical presentation, highlighting what the R7284U1004 can do.
Thank you, Steve. Looks like we don't have any questions from our today, so which I'm going to take as a sign that you have answered any and all questions that anyone might have had during your presentation. So if you think of a question after the close of this training, please reach out to your local Resideo's rep or send an email to homes.university@resideo.com, and we will make sure to get your questions answered. So thanks again, Steve. That was a great training. Training is something we're very passionate about here at Resideo, and we want to make sure that you have access to more in-depth trainings that are available on our products inside of our online learning platform. You can access the online training catalog by visiting the training page on our Resideo Pro website. And the first time you access the online training catalog, you'll be asked to create an account. And then going forward, you'll log into your training account to access these trainings. Currently, we've got about 20 online learning modules available, including several modules on our humidification portfolio, the T10 thermostat, and Prestige IQ thermostat. These online trainings cover everything from technical and installation details, and we also show you how to identify the right customer to sell these products to as well. And we're very excited to add this online training catalog to our training offerings. And if you're interested in more in-depth trainings, we encourage you to sign up for a Resideo Pro portal account to access these trainings. Also, if you're already a Resideo Pro Perks member, you will receive training credit when you enroll and take these online training courses as well. To find out more information about our upcoming session, please visit www.resideo.com/webinars. And if you search by the HVAC or plumbing tabs, you'll find the details for our upcoming sessions. Additionally, we record each of these sessions, and you can find those recordings on this same website by filtering for webinars with the label on demand. And then one last reminder to those contractors who did not include your NATE ID on your registration form and you'd like credit for today's session, please send an email with your first name, your last name, your NATE ID number, and the date of the session you attended to homes.university@resideo.com within 1 week of today's live webinar to receive credit for attending today's live training. And two final things to note before we close out today. Once our training session ends, you will be prompted to complete a survey regarding our webinar session. Please take a few minutes to provide us with your feedback on today's session. We're very interested in it, but also we use that feedback to help us create future topics. And we love to be able to create some training content for you there. So if you have any suggestions or questions on, please let us know in that feedback survey. And finally, you will receive an email from us in just a few days that includes some follow-up information on the products that we reviewed today, as well as a link to the website for more information on our trainings as well. And make sure you join us on Tuesday, November 30th at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time for our next training session on forced air zoning. So thank you all for joining us for today's Resideo webinar session. Have a great day, everyone.